a non-dual contemplation. So let's look at the experience of duality. Do you experience duality? This is just a straightforward, simple question. It's not meant to be esoteric or metaphysical or doctrinal or anything. Just look into your experience. Do you experience separation? Do you experience objects out there? Do you experience things at a distance? Do you experience things standing on their own? Do you experience things that are apart from one another and in relationship to one another? That's the experience of duality, the fundamental experience of duality. So look at that. First of all, just notice it. Notice, it does appear that things are at a distance, that the picture on the wall is actually out there on the wall, and the wall is not the picture, and the picture is not the wall, and I'm not the wall, and I'm not the picture. I'm over here, and I'm aware of the picture, right? Notice those perceptions in yourself. It's actually helpful to do that instead of trying to force an idea you have onto the experience, like trying to make things appear non-dualistic or non-separated or unified. That doesn't help really, to try to impose your own idea onto something or your interpretation of what non-duality means. It's much better to actually start with what's most authentic. Like, do I actually experience separation? And what is that like? What does it mean that I experience separation? So sometimes slowing down for a minute to just look at your experience and kind of, in a very simple, mundane, childlike way, ask, like, what does it appear as? What does it appear that's happening here? In the simplest way, right? And if and when you notice that it does appear that there are separate objects and there's distance and so forth, specifically that I'm a subject and all of it around me is objects, right? Noticing that is great. So then just ask, well, what is it about this experience that makes it seem that way? Or makes me think I know that makes it just appear sort of obviously dualistic? What is it that I'm actually taking reference from? And you'll often notice some dialogue like, oh, well, I know the picture's on the wall over there because I can see it from there, and I'm here and I can see my body, and my body's not that, right? You'll often notice this, but if you recognize what it is you're actually using for proof, what you're using to sort of define experience is you're using thoughts to define experience. You're using a thought of my body, that wall, that over there, that's in relation to this. So you're using conceptual sort of...
If you think it could be serious, ask me to call emergency services or someone you trust.
What the fuck? That's weird. My iPhone suddenly thought I was having an emergency, some kind of non-dual emergency. They were going to call the non-dual emergency services. So it's like, when we take reference from the idea of relationship, are we actually seeing what's here? Are we actually observing directly? Are we experiencing what's actually occurring? Or are we experiencing something second or third step down the road in mental processing? I'm not sure of a good way to say this because it does happen very quickly. And that's why it's helpful to slow down. It would seem preposterous in a way to say, well, all objects that are appearing here are only objects because I think they're objects. It might seem preposterous to think that until you notice why you believe it in the first place, if that makes any more sense. So that's why I'm kind of starting with just noticing what our ideas are about separation, and that we don't necessarily have to think there's one object, there's another object, there's another object, there's the ground, there's my foot, there's the sky. We don't necessarily have to think that ongoing as we move through the world to experience duality, But at some level of processing, we're experiencing the summation, the mental summation of all of that. And much of thought, much of what goes on in the mind is backward extrapolating those ideas of separation. It's sort of baked into thought. It's baked into the way thoughts occur, or at least baked into the content of thoughts. So it's helpful, again, to start by just noticing, what am I really taking reference from when I say there is separation? There are distinct objects. I'm here, that's over there, and so forth. And then once you've sort of recognized, okay, I guess I do see the world as divided up, then you can be more specific and look at something discrete, like I'm looking at a piece of paper, right? And you look at the paper and you look at the desk. The paper's white, and there seems to be a line between the paper and desk, and the desk is sort of tan and it has a wood grain on it, right? So those seem different to me. But if I move my eye between the white paper over the edge to the desk, what actually just occurred? What occurred in the visual experience? Did paper occur? No, paper is an afterthought. Did desk occur? No, desk is an afterthought. Did dividing line occur? No, dividing line is an afterthought. How about the color white? It's an afterthought. How about the color tan with texture? It's an afterthought. So all of these are afterthoughts, but something else happened there. There was something else experienced. There was something in direct experience that really isn't any of that. You could say, as the eye moves from the paper to the desk, what's actually experienced is a sort of fluctuation in color and shape, a change in color and shape. That's all that's really occurring. There's no edge that you actually find. The edge is a mental construct. Just as like color is a mental construct and texture is a mental construct. So all that's actually happening in the visual field is sort of kaleidoscopic color changes and movement. That's what's appearing. And it's important to see that to really start to dial into direct experience. That's not necessarily a non-dual realization, but it can get you pretty quickly into this territory where you're really starting to question, like, okay, what do I actually see? What am I actually seeing? What is actually happening in the visual experience, right? So get curious, right? Notice that there's a way to see what's there without any labels. Or you could even ask yourself, how can I see what's there without labels? What is that? What is this like, this visual experience right here? What is this like when I subtract the label picture wall, or I subtract the label computer screen, face, blue, tan, movement, stillness? When I subtract those labels, what's actually occurring? And so this really is like the turning point for non-dual is direct experience. It's one of those things that you might hear it many, many times talking about direct experience, and you may get something that feels like a taste of it, but when you really know direct experience, I guess there's no other way to say it, when you experience it directly, when you experience directly with no filters for 1 second or 10 seconds or 5 seconds, for an instant, it changes everything. It's so obvious. It's just so different. It's so much more full. It's so much more unfiltered, raw experience, and more intimate. It's also kind of sublime in a way. And it always is really great when someone experiences this, because they often have a very similar reaction. It's like one of surprise and like, oh my gosh, like you kind of want more of it. It's so real. It's like you finally touch the real. You've been looking through filters and veils for so long in the mind, and pushing away and pulling and judgment and belief and subjectification. All that stuff has been happening for so long that it's like when you finally get a taste of the real, it's very enticing. Yeah. But these kinds of contemplations can really start to break the spell of those layers of thought that are sort of preconceptual, non-conceptual even, but they're always supposing subject, object, 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 separation, distance, right? It's sort of all built into that processing. And we can really start to get under that by asking what's actually there. Edges it can be really helpful. Look at the edges of things, like again, between an object that's one color and an object that's another color. As your eye moves between them, what's actually happening in the immediate experience, in the direct experience? What's actually happening there? Is movement happening, or is it merely color shifts, color fluctuation? What's an edge? Do you ever see an edge, or do you interpret an edge? This isn't hard to see, at least conceptually, if you understand a little bit about how optical illusions work. Optical illusions often make things look curved that aren't. They make it look like there's an edge when there's not. They make things look inverted that are not inverted, and so forth, right? And that's because what they do, optical illusions, is they manipulate certain processing aspects of the way vision is processed by our brains, essentially. So the raw visual data is interpreted, and the interpretation is what we take to be the physical world and separation. But the raw data does not experience separation, to put it in a more scientific way. And so optical illusions can manipulate all of those assumptions that are built into it, built on top of the raw visual data, to make things look a way that we can navigate, move through in safety, find resources, navigate what appears to be dimension. So there's practical usefulness for these illusions of separation and space, but you can actually dispel the very deep belief that they're real, and you can completely dispel it, and it's hilarious when you do. So it takes a certain kind of curiosity and patience, but the probing can be definitely helpful. It helps many people to break these spells. What is an edge? Look right there and see it. How do I know that's an edge? Look at what thoughts do. Look at what your brain tells you about what an edge is, what the mind says about what an edge is, and notice that's thought. It's not that. Sensation works as well, right? So you can touch something that feels, let's say, cool to the touch. Put your hand on anything and feel it. What do you actually feel there? And then start with the mind. What does the mind say you feel? Oh, I feel a table. It's smooth. It's cool. It's my hand on top of the table. Okay. Close your eyes. Don't imagine the visual experience of a hand on a table. What do you actually feel now? Do you feel a hand on a table? Or is that something rather visual and or conceptual? It is, right? But there's still something there. There's still sensation there. Is it cool? Well, I have to compare it to something that's not cool to tell myself it is cool. And do I find the experience called cool directly in that experience? Do I find that? I don't, actually. I find that as an afterthought. I find that as some analysis that may have some function and importance for communication and so forth, but it's not in the actual experience, right? I'm just giving very specific examples you can use with any of the five senses. And it's pretty fun to do in a way, because it's so immediate. There's nothing there. There's no problem there. There's no struggle there. There's no agenda there. It's a sensation. But it's very intimate. The more you do this, the more intimate it gets. So you can do this with anything. Sensations in the chest, the body, the gut, the neck, even sensations associated with emotion that seem triggered or triggering. You can still do that. You can still do this with those, right? How do I know that emotion means whatever, that I'm afraid? How do I know that emotion means that so-and-so did X, Y, Z? Where's that actual knowledge? Where's the association? Is it in the sensation? Or is it in the interpretation of the sensation, right? Explore and see. And by doing this, you're exploring both the belief aspect of an emotion, and you're also doing the work of coming into direct contact with emotion centers in the body. So you can do this with essentially any stimulus. And so pick one. You have 5 senses. Where, like, you could look at something that's red, right? And ask yourself, where is red? Is red there? Right? Or is it here? Where's the red? And when you see that the red is here, or it's just a thought, essentially, what is still there? What remains? It's rather interesting what remains. And then you can even ask, okay, well, I can kind of see that there's still something there, even if it doesn't have to be labeled red or labeled anything about a visual description. And it still seems like it's over there. Okay, well, when I sort of look at that, whatever that object is, where's the over there-ness? Is it in that? Is it in the visual experience? Or is it up in here somewhere? Again, it's a concept. Over there is a concept. So now what is this like without the over there? This can suddenly just shift, and some people experience everything suddenly like really close. Like you can't push anything away anymore. It's just like whoosh, everything's flat or just right here in a strange way. Some people find that funny or really sort of fascinating, and then you adjust to it. And for a short time, it may feel like that. Other people find it a little bit suffocating, like distressing, like, whoa, it's too close, but you realize it is just that way, though. There's no way to like push the world out there and pull myself into here anymore. It feels sort of flat for a while, maybe. Those are all effects that can happen from doing this. At the same time, all you're doing is investigating the nature of illusory overlays that are unnecessarily building a scaffolding to encapsulate or enclose and underlie the sense of a separate self, a sense of a suffering self, the sense of a struggling self. Yeah. So that's what we're investigating. Yeah. Let me know how those contemplations go for you, and I can always do more if those are helpful. I approached it a little bit differently because everybody has a little different way of getting at this. And you can find your own way, of course, like whatever works for you, but it could be a combination of the things you've heard. This is a little bit more of a intellectual or dialectic deconstruction, but it's valuable as well. Maybe it just depends how you solve problems or how you get yourself to a place of more relaxed insight and certainty and direct experience, whether it's through deconstruction of a thought process or more of like a surrender to the flow of appearance, So anyway, hope that's helpful.